Widows, balls and goals, how are we all doing? Today, we're going to be looking at the Child's Play franchise. So I am going to use a tier list in just a little while, but before we do the tier list, I just want to do a brief synopsis of each of the movies. If you've never seen the Child's Play franchise, it's basically a slasher franchise. As opposed to a big hulking guy in a mask, or a silent stalker in a mask, or a burn victim, it involves a doll. A doll that is possessed by a serial killer. The killer, who's played by Brad Dourif, or voiced by Brad Dourif in every one of these movies, except the reboot, basically transfers his soul into a doll and then spends some of the movies trying to get his soul out of the doll and into a child. And these films are a lot of fun. There is only two that I don't really like, or one that I really dislike, and then one that I'm not too fussed on. But other than that, I enjoy most of these movies. The original Child's Play was released in 1988. I watched it as a child. I didn't find it too scary, even though I was one of those kids that was scared of everything. I found it very enjoyable. And as the series progressed, more and more comedy sort of inserted itself. And kind of like Chucky with more comedy, whereas I disliked Freddy when they kept adding more and more comedy. I think Chucky got better for it. Mostly because it's a doll. It's a haunted doll. Haunted dolls ain't that scary to me, especially Chucky. He doesn't look that scary, but somehow they pull it off as a horror villain. He's ranked up there with Freddy, Jason, and Michael Myers. You know, when you think of horror, it's those Pinhead, Chucky, Leatherface. The original was released in 1988, and then it spawned a franchise of 6 sequels, a TV show, and a rebooted movie. When you compare it to a lot of franchises with this many movies, it doesn't have as many weak films. The timeline isn't as messed up as a lot of the franchises. They all continue on from each other, and a lot of the time they bring old cast back into the movie, which again works in its favour as a franchise. The Chucky TV series, that even follows on from this franchise, directly linked. I really enjoyed the first one. And we're not going to be discussing the TV show in much depth, other than being mentioned in this introduction. I enjoyed the first series, and then it started to get way out there, and I kind of switched off. I haven't even finished the second series. I don't think I ever will. And it's rumoured that in the future, Don Mancini is looking at bringing back Glenn/Glenda from the seed of Chucky. You'll see where that comes in my ranking, because, yeah, not great. The original Child's Play, released in 1988, was directed by Tom Holland. No, not that one. It was written by Tom Holland, Don Mancini, and John LaFia. I hope I've said that right. This movie starred Brad Dourif as Charles Lee Ray, who later becomes Chucky when he transfers his soul into a doll. It also stars Catherine Hicks, Chris Sarandon, who was brilliant in Fright Night, and also the brother of Susan Sarandon, and Alex Vincent as the child actor. Alex Vincent, a very good child actor in this. And this all starts because Charles Lee Ray, the serial killer, is chased down by Detective Mike Norris, played by Chris Sarandon. And before he dies, he manages to transfer his soul through some sort of voodoo curse. Now, originally, this movie was supposed to feature more voodoo. And I don't know why they changed it, or they made it less about the voodoo. And then we follow the story of Andy and Karen Barkley. Karen is a single mum, and she has a young son, Andy. She struggles to make ends meet, and then she buys this doll for Andy for his birthday. And then the movie revolves around Chucky the doll killing people, Andy trying to warn people, and then nobody believing him. Andy's mum eventually discovers that Chucky is in fact killing people, and then has to convince the detective that that's what's going on. It's the doll, not Andy. Fantastic film. For 1988, the effects are great. You know, there's obviously animatronics going on, but at certain points there are people inside a Chucky suit acting as Chucky. I love this movie. Obviously, the movie ends with the destruction of the doll and us thinking that Chucky is dead. But, you know, when a movie is successful, they have to bring out a sequel. And in 1990, we got Child's Play 2. This was directed by John Lafia, who was involved in writing the story for the first Child's Play. Returning cast members are Brad Dourif as the voice of Chucky. I mean, he's all the way through this apart from the remake. Alex Vincent returns as young Andy. His mum's not in this one. He's living with a foster family because of basically the mental trauma of what Chucky did to him the first time. The original toy company, the Good Guy Dolls, that I believe was actually a real company that went out of business after the first movie. But much like the real world, this takes place 2 years after the original. This company start remaking the Good Guy Dolls and somehow accidentally bring back the soul of Charles as Chucky in another doll. And the doll spends the movie trying to get back to Andy. And he basically kills his way back to Andy. And much like the first one, this is a lot of death. And Andy trying to convince people that it's the doll. He's got a foster sister. Now, he isn't in one. Like, a lot of horror movies do this thing where people are adopted into a family and the family are just really bad. This movie doesn't do it. The foster family are not that bad. And Andy's foster sister, Kylie, tries to protect Andy. But the parents believe that Andy is just a troubled kid and the doll isn't going to do anything. And obviously, Chucky just goes on his murder spree. A year later, Child's Play 3 was released in 1991. Now, there is a rumour that Child's Play 3 was actually banned in the UK because of a real-life murder, where 2 young boys murdered a very young, well, he was a baby, James Bulger. Very shocking thing in the UK. I thought that this movie was banned because of those crimes, and in researching, it was never true. Police investigated the claims because so many people said about Child's Play 3. It was never, ever linked to this murder. So it's an unfair rap the Child's Play 3 gets. Child's Play 3's story is again a story by Don Mancini, but it's directed by Jack Bender. And this is the last film to be called Child's Play in the franchise until the reboot. Beyond this, everything is called Chucky. Andy Barclay returns, but he's played by an older actor, and that's Justin Wallin. And the reason they changed the actor was they wanted an older Andy for Chucky to, even though this is only a year later in our world, in the world of Chucky, this is years later. Child's Play 2, we see Chucky destroyed in a doll factory. And in this third installment, they are still making Good Guy dolls. Some of the melted parts from Chucky end up going into this new batch of Child's Play dolls, or Chucky dolls, Good Guy dolls. Charles Lee Ray's soul is once again put into one of the dolls. Chucky then spends this movie going after Andy at a military school. There's a final showdown, which is pretty cool, in a ghost train. And again, nobody believes Andy. Some kids at this military school start to believe him. Chucky's playing mind games with some of these kids. And if I remember correct, while there are some gruesome-ish murders, we never actually see Chucky kill anyone on screen. Quite bizarre. Now, we'll get into it in the rankings, but there's a lot of hate for this film that I don't quite hate as much as everybody else. You know, don't fuck with the Chuck. And because this movie wasn't as successful as the previous installments, we had a 7-year gap until The Bride of Chucky came out. Now, this was the most well-advertised Child's Play movie that I remember. Every bus stop had Bride of Chucky posters. There seemed to be a bit of a big buzz around this movie. The story again was by Don Mancini, but this time directed by Ronnie Yu, who most of you will be aware of from Freddy vs. Jason. The guy's got a very artistic flair as a director. I think this was his first American movie, and I believe this was originally supposed to go straight to video. He got a cinematic release, and this thing was massive. This movie doesn't feature Andy, it's not really linked to Andy, but it still continues on from Child's Play 3. And years later, Charles Lee Ray's girlfriend, Tiffany, tries to bring back her ex-lover. And unlike the previous 3 movies, this movie is pretty much entirely focused on the 2 dolls, as opposed to the human aspects and then how Chucky messes with them. So Tiffany brings Chucky back. They have an argument, and then Chucky kills Tiffany. And then he transfers her soul into a doll. You'll see where this ranks, but the premise sounds ridiculous and stupid, but it just works. And then as dolls, they need to find this magical amulet that will turn them back into human, or allow them to transfer themselves back into human host. Basically, this is a road trip movie where Chucky and Tiffany arrange a road trip for these two dolls that the drivers of the cars don't realize are possessed and can move. Eventually, hilarity ensues. Murder, blood, guts. Fun movie. And then again, we get a pretty big gap in the Child's Play movies until The Seed of Chucky comes out in 2004. And this was again back to Don Mancini, written and directed by him. Again, we get Brad Dourif, Jennifer Tilly. Jennifer Tilly returns as Tiffany Valentine, but we also get Jennifer Tilly playing a fictional version of herself in this movie. This movie goes off the rails majorly. And we also get Billy Boyd, who is the child of Tiffany and Chucky, who has two personalities, Glenn and Glenda. Now, given where our society is at the moment, this movie follows a bit of a different story, whereas Glenn is a ventriloquist dummy, and he is the offspring of Tiffany and Chucky, both of whom are killed at the end of Bride of Chucky. So Glenn is an orphan doll, so Glenn learns of his parents' death, and then he goes to Hollywood because Hollywood are making a Child's Play or a Bride of Chucky movie. So he goes to resurrect his parents, and then he resurrects them and discovers that his parents are murderers. And he's disgusted by the fact that they're murderers. And Chucky is in turn disgusted by Glenn/Glenda not having a taste for evil. This film, I'll just say now, this film is not going to be featured highly in my rankings. I can't stand it. Then we get a 9-year gap, and then we get The Cult of Chucky, which I don't remember being shown in cinemas. I thought it was a straight-to-DVD release. Apparently, it did get a limited release in cinemas. And we get a new character in this, Nika Pierce, who is in a wheelchair, and she is played brilliant by Brad Dourif's daughter. And in this movie, Chucky arrives at the family home and basically picks them off one by one. Some quite inventive ways. Brad Dourif's daughter's character basically is the survivor of the movie, but because she's in a wheelchair, it adds a extra scary element to this. This is quite a dark film. It's still got some of the comedy aspects, but it's quite a dark movie. 2017, we get The Cult of Chucky. Fiona Dourif reprises her role from the previous installment. Again, directed by Don Mancini, as was The Cult of Chucky. And in this movie, Nika is now in a mental institution because of what happened surrounding Chucky in the previous movie. And in this movie, it gets a bit nuts because Chucky is now able to split his soul into multiple Chucky dolls. And this movie features multiple Chucky dolls, which then plays into the TV show. We'll mention it briefly here. Child's Play 2019, where Chucky is now called Buddy, and he is voiced by Mark Hamill. And instead of being a haunted doll, it is an AI doll that's gone awry. Somebody gets fired from their job, and he offs himself. But before he offs himself, he damages the program in this one doll. And for the most part, this movie was not well received by fans of the original Chucky series. I still enjoy it. I can enjoy it for a different take on Chucky, or a different take on the Child's Play franchise. I thought it was good for what it was. I liked that it was a bit more gory and a bit more bloody than some previous installments. Then we get the Child's Play TV series. Then we get the Chucky TV series that's starting in 2021, and I believe it's just been cancelled. I couldn't make it all the way through this. You see a lot of characters reprise their roles from previous Chucky installments. There's quite a few of them turned back up. It still features Brad Dourif. It's created by Don Mancini, so it follows everything that's come before it, but just goes so into the realm of crazy with the multiple dolls and the multiple parts of Chucky's soul, and I couldn't keep up with it, and I really didn't enjoy it that much. But I will say, the initial season, I really enjoyed. It just got too crazy too fast for me. So we have a handy dandy Child's Play tier list. So we've got all of the movies here featuring Brad Dourif's Chucky. The remake's not included in this. I'll say now, if it was, it would be an A tier. I really enjoy the movie as a different take. I can take myself away from, it has to be Chucky, it has to be Brad Dourif. And I hope they make another one featuring Mark Hamill's Chucky, or Buddy. So the original Child's Play. I am fortunately or unfortunately old enough to remember all these movies. I was born in the very, very, very early 80s. So I grew up watching these movies, and I have a lot of nostalgia for especially the first two. because I have an uncle that's not that much older than me, and we used to watch these all the time. Initially, as kids, scare us, and then we used to have a riot watching these, and we would quote lines, and when we got older, still quoted lines. The original Child's Play, I'm going to put it into A tier. It was different to the other slasher franchises at the time. It was played as a serious movie. There were some cool moments in it. It was horror-centered. Chucky, even though he's a doll that you could just boot out of a window, there's a threat around him. And it's written and played out quite cleverly. This doll that nobody is believing is haunting Andy or trying to kill people around Andy for him to get Andy alone and transfer his soul over. It's kind of a whodunit from the detective's point of view. Really good movie. Very strong cast as well. And considering the age of this movie, I think it does a fantastic job. Charles Lee Ray stuff at the beginning. Charles Lee Ray, played by Brad Dourif, is really, really creepy. I love the first Chucky. It's not quite polished enough to be an S tier, but I love this thing. Child's Play 2. Obviously, it's a direct continuation. It was made very quickly after, as was Child's Play 3. Child's Play 2, I'm going to put in S tier. It took what made the first movie work, and it ramped it up. It was a little bit more comedy added, but there was a lot more violence added. And the story fitted perfectly as a direct sequel. I really love Child's Play 2. Now, if I'm going to rewatch the original trilogy, my favourite of the original trilogy is always going to be Child's Play 2. Child's Play 3 came out a year later, and initially when I watched this movie, it was instantly my favourite Child's Play movie. I thought this thing was great when I was a kid. On rewatching as an adult, which I do quite often, I don't hate this movie, but it's not quite as good as the first two for me. Obviously, there was the rumours of this thing being banned in the UK because of the Jamie Bulger murder, where he was murdered by 2 other children. Terrible, terrible real-life events. And in the UK specifically, it seemed to bolster this movie. People wanted to watch it because it was banned. It was never actually banned, but that was the rumour. We didn't have the internet then, so there was no way to check. Even though my mum at the time run a video rental store, this was on the shelf, so it clearly wasn't banned. But the rumour was it was a banned movie. Because it was supposedly a banned movie, we all wanted to watch it all the more and loved it. Going back as an adult, they clearly started to run out of ideas with this franchise. Whilst a lot of the tropes of the first two were repeated, there is this sort of final battle in this ghost train ride, and it's really, really cool. I really enjoy it. I like how Chucky messes with all the other kids, and he plays these mind games where he gets the kids to do things on his behalf. Very well written. It's not quite as good as Child's Play 2. I'll put it in A tier, bordering on B tier, because it's nowhere near as good as the original, but I still have a lot of fun with this film. Then we got The Bride of Chucky, the Ronnie Yu crazy Chucky road trip movie. I adore this thing. It is my favourite in the franchise. Going into S tier, this is where Chucky came with more one-liners, more jokes. This movie, considering it was supposed to go direct to DVD, is so polished. It looks amazing. The addition of the bride, played by Jennifer Tilly, just comedy gold. There's some really cool kills in this. Very horror-centered comedy movie. I love this movie. The one-liners, the jokes, the effect, all really, really cool. There's some weird scenes in it, but it all just adds to the fun. And then we get to see the Chucky. I was excited for this movie, and it looks like a fan film. It has not got the polish of Bride of Chucky at all. I remember watching it for the first time and about 40 minutes in thinking, I am bored out of my skull here. There is not much I enjoy in this movie. It's too weird. It's too out there. The character of Glenda just moping about. I've only ever seen this movie twice. I have no desire to ever watch it again. I rewatched the entire Chucky franchise last year, and I just skipped Seed of Chucky because I hate it that much. I'm going to put it in an F, which would be get the fuck out of here with this shit. I don't like it. Curse of Chucky. I really enjoyed this movie. Again, got that direct-to-DVD quality about it. It did get a cinematic release. The story on this is really, really strong. Fiona Dourif is fantastic, but if you look at as much behind-the-scenes stuff as I do, you can't help but notice how similar she is looking to her dad. And I think maybe they should have played into it in this, that it was Chucky's daughter. The whole film, what adds to the horror is that she is in a wheelchair and Chucky is stalking her and killing people off around her and convincing people that it's her doing it. It's a good movie. It fits perfectly in with the franchise. Chucky has still got the one-liners, but they're not quite as plentiful as Bride and Seed. It's a good, solid B-tier movie. I enjoy it. I can rewatch it. Then we got The Cult of Chucky, and there are elements of this I really enjoy. There are some returning cast members. Oh wait, the remake is on here. Cool. I didn't really enjoy this. There's some really cool elements of this movie, but for the most part, it's quite forgettable. I will rewatch it. It's still 10 times better than Seed of Chucky, but it's not as good as The Curse of Chucky. So this is going to go into C tier. And then that leaves us with the Child's Play remake. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the different take. I enjoyed the modernization of the story. I enjoyed that they didn't call him Chucky and then try to replace the previous movies. It is an Elseworld movie the way I watch it, and I think this will go into A tier. I really enjoy this film. I enjoyed the cast of it. I like the new ideas they brought forward, because clearly they ran out of ideas in between certain films in this franchise, like 2 good ones, 1 not so great one, a good one, a not so great one, a good one, a not so great one. So there you go, there's my tier list. This is obviously a quicker tier list than the other movies because there's not so many of them and the timeline is coherent. That's why I went into a bit more detail about the movies before putting them into the actual tier list. Because what I find is if I try to talk to us for the movies while placing them, the movies get very little said about them, and then I focus too much on the movies in S tier. So let me know what you think of this list down in the comment section down below. How would you rate the Chucky franchise? Do you enjoy the remake? Because I know a lot of people that don't. Original Child's Play fans, which I am one of, tend to not enjoy it. I loved it. Look forward to your comments. Much love to you all. Be it out.